Loucks is starting to rebuild the Florida State basketball program, but how long will it take him to get the Noles in a competitive place in the ACC?
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football writer and recruiting analyst. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Florida State basketball is in a complete rebuilding situation. Loucks comes back to the program he once played at, and now he's in the midst of a transfer portal run. And he's got some recruiting to do. How long will it take the Florida State Seminoles to become relevant again in what is otherwise a down ACC? To help me figure that out is one of the most crazy guys in the history of the world, Isaac Shade.
That's fair. That's fair, Brian.
Locked on college basketball, locked on Tar Heels. You've done a little bit of everything with hoops, and you're probably as good a guy as I can get on the show to talk about the transfer because, I've got enough going on with Locked On the Portal with the transfer portal football. I can't keep up with basketball too. Can't do it.
No.
So you're going to be my guide. I know who they are, and I'm finally going to get to watch college basketball this next year. I have something to follow because I tried to watch Florida State some a little bit early last year. I couldn't do it. That was bad, bro. I mean, they overachieved and they were still bad.
They did.
Loucks, did you like the hire before we go any
I do. Yeah. What's interesting to me, Brian, is we'll see football will get this too, but we see these hiring trends. And here's what I mean. For a while in college basketball, there was this trend of hey, let's hire an alum that doesn't have much coaching experience and see how that works out. Like Pat Ewing, we had Juwan Howard, Hubert Davis at the school I cover, John Shire at Duke, just a couple examples, right? Some have worked out tremendously. Others are already out the door and wishing they had a job. Now we've seen a trend where teams are starting to hire either alum or guys that are close to the program that have been NBA assistants. So that started last offseason at BYU after Coach Pope heads off to Kentucky on the back end of that whole coaching carousel that was bonkers that took Coach Cal off to Arkansas. We saw them hire Kevin Young. Kevin Young comes down from the Suns where he was an assistant to coach there. Interestingly enough, Utah has just done the same thing, getting Alex Jensen, who's actually an alum, to come back and coach Utah. He was an assistant. And then now FSU is the third high major school I've seen do it, getting Coach Loucks out of an NBA assistant role coming in to do this. I think it's brilliant for a couple of reasons, Brian. Let me just list off a couple and then we'll see where we want to go. Number one, where do all these college guys want to go when they're done? The NBA. What better thing can you do than to get a guy that's got literal experience on an NBA coaching staff to say, here's what you need to do, here's where you need to grow, and here's all the contacts I can make for you to get you to the league and give you legitimate feedback if you're an actual NBA player or not. And then there's also just like Alabama does this really well. Nate Oates has them rolling with a high-level NBA type offense. And you see a lot of other schools that don't have that. And guys, what do they don't want to be playing like on the football side. I don't want to be playing some triple option thing. I want to play in a pro style offense so that I can be ready to play in the NFL. Same is true in college basketball. I want to play in a style of offense and defense that's going to better prepare me for the NBA. Guess who knows how to do that? Loucks. So I love the hire. I think it should work. He was a great player at FSU. I personally remember watching him and really liking his game. And so I think, we haven't seen a single minute of basketball action, but I like the hire.
I think he's very enthusiastic. He loves the school. His family wants to be there. He met his wife at Florida State. I think there's a lot of reasons to like it. And I think that's also why they've got Kobe McGee, Martin Somerville, Jay Jones, Chauncey Wiggins, and Robert McRae V, among others, already in the door from the transfer portal. Whichever player or players you want to hit, but Kobe McGee, just as an example, 2-guard out of Drexel, pretty good player. Is he going to be a top 5 pick in the NBA draft? Probably not. But year one for Florida State, I kind of set some private expectations for what they get out of the portal. They're already ahead of where I thought they'd be, and they're not necessarily done. where do you go with it? Like, okay, now do we raise the bar a little bit? How do you do that?
No, you underpromise and overdeliver, Brian, all day long. Why? Because this is all about keeping a job, right? And so, like, let's use Pat Kelsey in Louisville. Let's stay in the ACC. Last year, Pat Kelsey comes to Louisville from College of Charleston, where Louisville had been, what's the phrase, god awful the past 2 years, and that's putting it kindly.
They were too.
They had won a combined total of 12 games in those previous 2 years. Pat, and the reason I use Pat Kelsey is because it feels very similar to Coach Loucks. He comes in with a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of like revival is what he called it. I love, just branding and energy. He brings in like literally a brand new roster at Louisville, and they wildly overperformed, right? Finished top 3 in the ACC last year, along with Duke and Clemson. And it wasn't like he was making massive promises. Of course, there wasn't much room to go but up for Louisville. But he just came in and said, basically, we're going to work hard. We're going to be together. We're going to set a new culture. And then we'll see what happens on the court. But ultimately, we trust the process. And if the process works and we get the right guys, then the wins and losses will come, right? And thankfully for Louisville, they had more wins than losses. So if I'm Luke Loucks, I'm not trying to set any bar, any expectations other than we're going to work hard, we're going to play together, and we're going to revive Florida State basketball, right? Like, let's get back to, I hated to see how the Leonard Hamilton era ended because he had it rolling in the early 20s. You and I were talking pre-show, like, who knows what they would have done had there not been COVID in 2020, where they were named the ACC champs, basically. Like, that's what I want to see, and that's what I'm really hopeful that Coach Loucks can get back to. But yeah, the lower the expectations you set, the better you can do with the fan base really quick. And then year 2 and 3, you really start ramping up.
I think the bar for me now is, okay, they need to be above 500 next year, and they need to have some competitiveness. Again, I'm not saying they're going to go beat Duke in Cameron.
Sure.
But I also don't want to see them, when I turn on the TV, look like a JV basketball team just because they brought in a bunch of training. He's got all this expertise. I mean, he was at Golden State at one point. That's about as good a learning curve to come from. Steve Kerr, say what you will about him because he's got great players. He still has to coach them. So I love that. And I also love that he's got a balance. Like, he's got a couple of point guards already. He's looking to play. He even used this term. I don't want to call it positionless basketball. I want everybody to be able to pass. He wants it to be an NBA offense. Yeah. To your point, I love that. So I think it'll be a pretty easy sell. So I'm going to ask one basic recruiting question. Can they get one guy between now and whenever that, if they just add one more big guy, one more shooter or something, they might be halfway decent next year, because I think they're going to get a couple more portal guys. Is that fair?
It is fair. Here's the nice thing, like, Brian, I know you live in the football world so much where it's like, you've got to have so many pieces that can play, right? Like, literally in college basketball, there is no longer the excuse of, give me 3-4 years to get my guys and then we're rolling.
Do
what?
2 years tops now.
2 years tops, right? And that's what Kenny Payne got. Like, I would have fired Kenny Payne after 1 year, if I'm being honest, at Louisville. But it's like, there's no reason, because all you need, like basketball, you literally can rely on one guy to be incredible. Walter Clayton Jr., that was just the MOP of the Final Four. He was literally a 0 star coming into college, Brian, at Iona, playing for Rick Pitino. And then now he's basically like a first-team All-American. He was 3rd runner-up behind Cooper Flagg and behind Janai Broome from Auburn. Like, if you can land that dude, then you're in great shape with it. And so really, college basketball, I like a roster that goes 8 deep. You got your 5 starters, and then you use maybe 3 bench guys and don't give minutes to a whole bunch of it. And that's going to be interesting, because that was how Leonard Hamilton ran his team, right? Where he had 10, 11 guys trotting out there. So that's another angle of this I'm really curious to see too, is what does Coach Loucks do in terms of personnel? But I think you're spot on, man. If you can land like just one more like stud to go with what I think is a good base that he's already built, then they could be in great shape.
When we come back, I'm going to have a more difficult question for Isaac, but one that he will enjoy. It's talking about NIL in basketball, because what you just talked about, it's a big deal. One player changes your roster. Everybody knows it, but that also means I want to know if some of these NIL numbers are true. because some of the numbers floating around, man, they are just gross. That is next here on Locked on Seminoles. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start actually building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can also use Monarch Money to check your finances, track spending, and even plan for your long-term goals. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. All right, Isaac, the difficult question for me, because I know I grew up in Indiana. I love basketball. But some of the numbers that I've seen thrown around for guys that weren't even like the number one player at certain places, 3 million, 4 million. I've seen, and how much because there's a lot of posturing. Just use the NFL draft. Oh, somebody's going to do this or that. There's so many lies with the draft, and I'm sure that's part of it too. But am I to believe some of this $3-4 million stuff? Is that accurate?
Here's what's wild about this, Brian. Two off seasons ago in the portal, it was like, holy cow, you just spent a couple $100,000 on a top flight dude. That's crazy money. And then last year, right out of the gate in the portal, Umar Ballo, that went from Arizona to Indiana, went for like $1 million. And it was like, I'm sorry, Hoosiers, you did what now? And then as supply dwindled and demand went up late in the portal season, we saw Coleman Hawkins go from Illinois to Kansas State. And that was a $2 million price tag. And I remember on the show, we're just like, what is happening? And so the problem is that because of the lack of a CBA or salary cap or anything like that, each offseason now, these numbers have continued to escalate. And so there's nothing that continues to shock me, because I expect it to keep exponentially going up each year, because basically, what is a player worth? A player is worth what some idiot with money is willing to spend on him. And so I literally last offseason, I sat down one day and I said to myself, I am no longer going to be shocked by any dollar amount, because it's just going to keep jumping up, just like we see in the pro ranks, right? Where it's like, what was that crazy deal that Vlad Guerrero Jr. got for it's like, and that's where we're going. And part of it, Brian, this actually just occurred to me the other day. We talk about college athletics now, how professionalized it is. One of the big differences is this. In the let's just stay with Vlad Guerrero. Say he goes down with a critical injury this season for the Blue Jays. They can go out and sign whomever they want midseason off the waivers, bring them up from AAA, make a trade, whatever they want to do. In college football, college basketball, whatever it is, you're locked in. You don't get to make a trade. You don't get to bring somebody in off waivers. You can't bring them up from the minor league ranks or whatever it is. And so it's like, I'm going to spend whatever I got to spend on whoever I think that dude is, or that dudette, if we're talking the ladies side of things, because it has to be that reliable. And then because of the lack, again, it's like, if you got the money and you want to spend it, why on earth are we saving it? It's like an auction draft. Like in fantasy sports, I love an auction draft, but the thing is, like, some people will sit around like, I'm not going to spend, that's too steep. I'm going to wait till the prices go down. And then you're left and there's nobody in the pool and you got a whole bunch of cash left over. And it's like, I would rather go spend as much money as I can on the dude that I want. So let's make that happen. And I don't care what the price tag is.
Yeah, I guess there's some people with some serious cash. Like I went to Indiana, like IU basketball's. I'm not surprised on the ballot. Like they're going to win at some point because they're going to throw so much money at it. It's not going to matter. It really matters in that state. But that was just the beginning. So that brings us back around to Florida State. Look, at some point, the rubber's got to meet the road if they're really going to be an upper echelon team.
That's right.
Are they going to be able to compete with that? That is the question. And I don't know if there's an answer to that yet. That's probably a little iffy. But they've got for football, they got the stadium construction. And look, whether we want to, it's not a very friendly topic, But if Norvell doesn't win this fall, all that money comes out of one kitty, Isaac, and he's owed about $50 million.
That's a good point. That's a great point.
Look, it's if you're just a hoops fan following Florida State, you're attached to that. That is not friendly. And they also got to be thinking about there's a lot of rumors they're going to eventually buy out the short-term deal on the ACC. I'm sure you've covered it too.
Yeah.
They're in a horrible spot to go get guys unless they got a booster that does. And to my knowledge, I have no idea, but they don't have a basketball guy like that. So is this going to be just a developmental program? Am I reading that right? Unless they got that booster, because they're not going to get the 5-star point guard out of IMG or something like that each. They're not. So how does it work?
Here's what's interesting. I'm in a pretty similar spot in my coverage of the Tar Heels because Carolina went out and dumped a bunch of money into Belichick and his staff into the NIL budget. And because Carolina, the flip of FSU, Carolina is a basketball school first, foremost, and always. And all the basketball people are freaking out because it's like, hang on, are we going to have enough to also then give to the basketball program to go out and get the dudes we need? With Florida State, I think there is enough tradition and history from a basketball standpoint that it's not going to be, it won't be allowed to be an afterthought. It might not get and probably won't get the money that football does because it's Florida State and it's the Noles and that's what we're going to spend on. But I think that there's enough pride in Seminole basketball that there will be money found. Obviously, we're still waiting on the House settlement and what that's going to do in terms of rev share and how the school can negotiate with players. That's a big factor in this as well. But in the same way that we're just saying all it takes in basketball is one, maybe two guys, and then you're rolling. To your point, is there just somebody out there that comes out of the woodwork that says, I want to bankroll Florida State basketball? And if you can get that person, and I don't know if that'll happen. And so in the meantime, what that means for Coach Loucks is one of the biggest issues right now in college basketball is roster construction. It's a more tricky balance than it is in football because it's like, again, if we're just playing 8 dudes, we got to have the right pieces in the right spots. And it's going to take a while to see how they all fit together as you bring in, this roster that's got all these, you bring in Cam Miles and you bring in Bassong, the 2 incoming freshmen. You got Somerville and McCray and Wiggins and Jones and McGee, all these incoming transfers. You bring that alongside a couple of the holdovers, and it's like, okay, let's make a stew. How does it all fit together? You might not know that until January or February, right? And it's just how do we bide time until we get there? That's part of the weird process right now is learning that. So if he can, Coach Loucks, get a couple dudes, like I know, like for Chauncey Wiggins, this is his 4th year, so he's going to be out of eligibility. For Kobe McGee coming over from Drexel, this is his 4th year, so he's out of eligibility. But Somerville comes over from UMass Lowell. He's got 3 years of eligibility. You've got LeJay Jones coming over. I think he's got 2 more years of eligibility. He had a year at Tarleton State and then last year at St. Bonaventure. For Rob McCray, I think he's just got 1 year as well. So you got a couple multi-year guys that maybe you can build on with that. And so, your question was, can it be a developmental place? I hope so, right? But there have not been many schools that have been able to do it in this day and age. Literally in the Power 5 structure, there were 2 programs last year that didn't bring in a single transfer. That was Purdue and that was Marquette. And so it's like, it's just going to be part of the deal now, Brian, year after year after year. But maybe if that's the culture Coach Loucks can sell, like, hey, I'm doing NBA things, but I'm going to develop you. And if that becomes known, then even if the money doesn't quite match it, I would rather be developed than make more money.
To that point, I want to use a football reference, and I think it'll apply to hoops too. If you look at the final 4 to 8 teams that made the college football playoff, especially the Final Four, Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame, and Ohio State. What do you think they had in common in terms of roster construction? High school. 19 of the 20 offensive linemen, if I remember correctly, were high school recruits.
Wow.
So if you can, you got to have some cachet. Let's not kid ourselves to get some of those kids. That's just the way it is. But if you can get them, you also got to keep them.
Yeah.
I think roster retention, meaning, coach, I believe in it. B, they're going to pay me if I'm going to stick around here. Let's not kid ourselves. That's probably the biggest question with the Noles. And then finally, what you said, the stew. You still got to put the right guy. If you have 4 guards that are great, well, if nobody's rebounding the ball and playing any defense underneath, you're not winning. You got to have a right roster construction. But I think Florida State, the only really big question is still back to that point about, do they have Big Daddy Booster in a special circumstance? Like if a kid blows up, you bring in a 3-star, and all of a sudden he's averaging 18.5 points and 6 assists, you're probably not going to keep him unless you get out the wallet. That's just how that – he might be in Chapel Hill, among other places. That's just reality. So my last question on this part of it before we go into ACC hoops is Florida State going to have to be, at least short term, more than likely a developmental program, in your opinion, if you had to guess?
I would say, short term. That's a great way to put it. If it was long term, I don't think I would say that. But in the short term, yeah. But also, you just used a football analogy. Let's use a baseball analogy. How could we moneyball this thing? I think about that a lot. Is like Billy Beane and the A's went out and said, what's everybody missing? How could we be competitive with our small market money? And I'm not saying Florida State's going to be small market money, but maybe compared to some of the blue bloods of college basketball. Yeah. Right. So could we tap international players more? Could we look at some JUCOs and find dudes? Are there D2 players? Like we just saw at Drake as a great example of that last year. Their head coach came in from a powerhouse D2 program, bought 4 D2 starters with him, who 4 of those 5 D2 starters started at Drake in the Missouri Valley Conference this year. Bennett Sturt's the biggest name among them. And now they're all headed with him to go play at a Big Ten school. It's like, so maybe there's some uncharted territory that Florida State could say, all right, everyone is zigging. How do we zag and beat everybody where they're not looking? I've been thinking a lot about that this offseason. Like if we can't compete from a money standpoint, how do we compete from a smart standpoint? Maybe there's something to that.
I agree with that. When we come back, I'm going to talk to Isaac about the ACC. Is it going to stink again next year in basketball? Because it was terrible this year. That is next here on Locked On Seminoles. All right, Isaac, I'm going to blame you for the Tar Heels being terrible last year. That was weird. Like it seriously was. My whole life. Like I grew up in the Dean Smith era, etc. They fell off. Obviously, Duke was really good, and they should have won it, to be honest. They choked at the end. I know that probably didn't break your heart. They absolutely choked. But outside of Duke, the league was bad. I mean, they didn't have anybody. I don't know what the deal is with that, and I don't know why. But I'm trying to think, when was the last time the ACC was that bad?
I'll put it this way, Brian. The ACC ended up getting 4 teams in the NCAA tournament, skin of their teeth. North Carolina was literally the last team in. And exactly, that was an iffy proposition. It really probably should have been 3 ACC teams in with Clemson, Louisville, and Duke. Had it been so, it would have been the first time since, I had this number in my head during the tournament, but I want to say it was since the 2000 NCAA tournament was the last time the ACC only had 3 teams in. And that was when there were only 9 teams in the ACC. And one of those 3 that made it was Maryland. So that's how long it's been since the ACC put that few in. Here's another metric, Brian, that was helping me look at it. You know, in basketball, we have the net, which is a daily ranking that comes out from an NCAA developed algorithm that basically just ranks teams 1 through 365 in college basketball. And basically it helps to, all the conversation about quad 1, quad 2, quad 3, like that's all based off of where you're at in the net. The ACC has 18 teams in it in basketball. 9 of those 18 teams finished outside the top 100 in the net last year, Brian. Of the other Power 4 conferences, so in basketball, we consider the Big East another one of the power conferences, along with Big 10, Big 12, and SEC as well. Check this out. Big East, 1 school outside the top 100. Big 10, 1 school outside the top 100. SEC, 0 teams outside the top 100. Worst was 89. And Big 12, 0 teams outside the top 100. Worst was 95. So ACC, 9 teams outside the top 100. The other Power 4 conferences, 2 teams combined. That ain't it, man. And it's a talent issue, and it's a coaching issue, in my opinion, are the 2 issues.
Those are the two most important by a landslide. So we got us a problem here, Isaac.
Right.
Okay,
Well,
so let's go with Virginia first. The guy quit because he didn't want to deal with NIL. Is that accurate? Okay. They're off the hook. If you don't want to be that guy, I would rather you leave.
That's right.
I'm cool with that. But explain Wake Forest, explain Georgia Tech, Florida State into the coaching run, whatever. Miami. That was bizarre. I mean, that was like, are you kidding me? I called for him to get fired a year after, and I got people mad at me. I'm like, look, it's done. You can tell he's done.
Yeah.
And then nobody said anything to me after this past year. So,
yeah. I mean, we were just talking about those net rankings. Miami was literally the lowest ranked Power 5 team in the entire net. It was awful.
There's no way that should be the case at Miami.
That should never be the case. And like part of it this year, Nigel Pack got hurt early in the season and was out most of the season. But even still, on paper, that team should have been much better. And I was even more dumbfounded the year before because they still had Norchad O'Meara. They had big what's-his-butt that went off to the NBA draft with the big flowy hair and like all of this talent. And this didn't work. Matthew Cleveland that came over from Florida State. And it's just like, it's not working. And that's coming like 3 years prior to this year, they made the Elite Eight. 2 years prior to this year, they're in the Final Four and then just tanked. And so you look at it, and I remember last offseason, Andy and I on Locked On College Basketball were doing all our conference previews. And each time we always do a predicted transfer player of the year for the other four power conferences. Like, man, who do we go with? This is insane. There's so much talent influx into this conference. And with the ACC, it was like, where are all the transfers? Why aren't they coming? And so there was a talent deficit across the board in our conference. Some of it's the money, the issue, you talked about it earlier with the media deal that the SEC and the Big Ten have, right? Like that might not factor in directly into how we can pay athletes, but it factors into things like Alabama on their sideline in college basketball has 4 dudes just sitting there watching like advanced metrics and relaying that to the staff. We're not seeing that in the ACC. And then on the coaching side, you mentioned like Jim Larinaga out, Tony Bennett out, Mike Bray out, Mike Krzyzewski out, Roy Williams out, like on and on and on. And who is the elder statesman now in the ACC? Brad Brownell at Clemson is literally the longest tenured ACC coach now. And then behind him, it would have been Kevin Keatts at NC State. Well, he just got fired. And so it's like the ACC needs to be making great hires. And that's to bring it back around to Tallahassee. That's why I think Coach Loucks has to be a hit. And not just him, but Jay Lucas at Miami and all of these guys in all of these places, they've got to be a hit. Ryan Odom at going back to Virginia. Coach Dave Odom's son, a literal ACC legend, right? Like that's got to work, man. It has to be able to hit.
Well, let me ask you this. You brought up Big Ten and SEC probably have the most money in general by a landslide. Why did the Big 12 do so well in basketball?
They have the coaches. They've got Bill Self. And
Bill Self's as good as it gets, by the way.
Honestly. And I know Kansas has had it down 2 years by their standards. It doesn't matter. Bill Self is absolutely one of the best in the sport. Kelvin Sampson. Yes, I know they choked at the end of the national championship game. That dude is a rock star of a coach. Were it not for the outdated rules that got him canned at Indiana, like who knows where he would be today, right? And then, I mean, you look at some of the other coaches, you look at the talent. Previous to this year, they were the best conference in college basketball for multiple years in a row. So I think that's part of it, is that they had all the talent in the Big 12 and some steady coaches already. And then part of the difference with the Big 12 too is when conference realignment happened, they didn't bring in, with all due respect, SMU and Cal and Stanford. They brought in BYU, they brought in Arizona, they brought in Houston, all of these great college basketball programs to make an already strong conference even better. We didn't do that.
Arizona, like my dead grandmother could recruit somebody to Arizona. It's not that hard. It's not. So I get it. That's a good point. But like the Big 12 is really underrated in basketball, even though they're really good all the time and they don't get enough coverage. Now, I don't even follow the Big 12, but like they got somebody in the top 5 every freaking year. So it's just so wild that when I was looking at it, like, okay, Duke's good. And then like, my head about came off my shoulder. I couldn't find the next ACC team.
No, yeah, absolutely.
It was bad. Okay. So who's going to be the team besides Duke next year that'll be up? I'll end it on that. You got it. I mean, is it Carolina? Is it somebody else, or am I just off here?
Great questions. Carolina should be much improved next year. Part of Carolina's issue last year was their non-conference schedule was like the dumbest gauntlet I've ever seen, where they played like I think it was 7 of the final AP top 10 in their non-conference.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean it was absolutely bonkers, Brian. And so I think that really hurt them because again, we're talking about how do you get roster chemistry together when you got all these new guys, and you just don't have time for that if you're playing that kind of schedule. So that was an issue there. They've gotten better across the board, more depth. I think they'll be better. I think Louisville is going to be strong again as well. They retained some talent, and they've already brought in several new guys, including getting Kason Pryor back. I thought he was going to be their best player last year. He got hurt early in the year and just announced earlier this week he's coming back. They should be good. And then, like, I think honestly, Brian, it's not even just about top end, right? Like, can we just see Miami and Virginia and Boston College just take a little bit of a step forward, right? And I think that helps the conference as a whole, so that you're looking at, like, in the SEC, almost every game you play is quad 1 or quad 2. Last year, 14 of their 16 schools made the NCAA tournament. In the ACC, quad 1 games were so hard to come by. And that's the thing. It's not like teams we got to have 10 teams in the top 25, but could we just have 15 inside the top 100? That would be great, because a quad 1 game on the road, you just got to be top 75. That's all it has to be. So we're just looking for teams to take small steps forward.
That's fair. That's fair. Isaac, tell everybody where they can find your work, my friend.
I'm most active social media wise on Twitter, X, whatever you call it. Just at Isaac Shade, my name. Brian, I've started doing some videos, some just little dumb shorts, having fun with it. Because why not? People don't want to just hear me rattle off numbers. So I've been trying to do some of that. And then every day on Locked On Tar Heels, if you're interested in that. But Locked On College Basketball, man, if you want to have more of these conversations, my co-host and I, Andy Patton, are on there every day, just like Brian, all off-season long as well. And so we'd love to see you there.
All right, man. I appreciate it. Locked On Seminoles, Odyssey, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, everywhere you can find your pods. Thank you. Like and subscribe. We will see you again soon on Locked On Seminoles.